The dust kicked up behind the stagecoach as it rolled into Silver Ridge, Arizona territory. It was the summer of 1882, and the heat made everything shimmer like a mirage. Among the tired passengers stepping down was a young woman of 22, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and secrets she wished she could bury in the desert sand. Her name was Elizabeth Wade, though she'd been going by Beth for the past 3 months. Beth had auburn hair that she kept pinned back tight, and eyes that had seen too much trouble for someone so young. She wore a simple gray dress, already dusty from the journey, and boots that had walked many hard miles. The first thing Beth noticed about Silver Ridge was how everyone stared, not the curious glances you'd expect for a newcomer, but something colder, harder. She'd seen those looks before in 2 other towns, right before things went bad. She found a boarding house on the edge of town. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, was a heavy woman with suspicious eyes that looked Beth up and down twice before speaking. "You got money for rent?" Mrs. Patterson asked, one hand on her wide hip. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a seamstress." "I can pay weekly." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "Wait, you said your name was? Any relation to Jack Wade?" Beth's heart sank, but she kept her face calm. "He was my father, ma'am. But I'm not him." The older woman's expression turned sour. "Your father robbed the Denver train 5 years back. 3 men died. You expect me to believe his daughter's any different? I was 17 when that happened, ma'am. I hadn't seen him in 2 years before that, and I haven't seen him since. I just want to work and mind my own business." Money spoke louder than prejudice, at least for now. Mrs. Patterson took Beth's coins and showed her to a tiny room at the back of the house. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out at nothing but scrubland. That first week, Beth tried hard to fit in. She set up her sewing supplies and put a sign in the general store window offering her services. A few women came, mostly curious to see the outlaw's daughter up close. They'd hand over torn dresses or loose buttons, but they wouldn't sit for fittings. They'd leave the clothes and come back later, like being in the same room with her might be catching. The sheriff was named Pike, a tall man with a thick mustache and eyes like flint. He stopped by the boarding house on Beth's 3rd day in town. "Just want you to know I'm watching," he said, standing in the doorway while Beth was trying to thread a needle. "Your father's still wanted. If he shows up here, you'll hang right alongside him." "My father won't come here," Beth said quietly. "I don't know where he is. That's what they all say." Pike tipped his hat, but there was no courtesy in the gesture. "One step out of line, Miss Wade, just one." The trouble started small, the way it always does. Mrs. Henderson claimed a silver thimble went missing after Beth returned her mended dress. Then old Mr. Cooper swore someone had tried to pick the lock on his store after dark, and of course, didn't the outlaw's daughter live just down the street? Beth hadn't taken anything. She hadn't gone near that store. But the truth didn't matter when people had already made up their minds. By the 2nd week, children threw rocks when she walked to the well. By the 3rd week, nobody would hire her for sewing work. By the 4th week, Mrs. Patterson was knocking on her door with a cold expression. "I need you out by tomorrow," the landlady said. "Other boarders are complaining. Say they don't feel safe with you here. But I've paid through the end of the month. I'll give you back half. That's more than fair considering." Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. "I got a business to run. Can't have it if folks think I'm harboring criminals. I'm not a criminal. Your father was. That's close enough for most people." Beth packed that night by candlelight. She'd been through this before in Colorado and New Mexico. Small towns had long memories and no forgiveness. She thought about heading to California, maybe even Mexico, somewhere people didn't know the name Jack Wade. But she was tired. Tired of running, tired of explaining, tired of carrying her father's sins like stones in her pockets. With nowhere else to go, Beth took her carpet bag and walked out past the edge of town as the sun came up. The desert stretched out forever, all red rocks and tough brush that somehow survived in this harsh place. She found a spot near some rocks that gave shade and made herself a camp. It wasn't much. She had a blanket, some beans and hardtack, a pot for boiling water, and her sewing kit. She gathered dead wood for a fire and rationed her water carefully. The nearest creek was 2 miles away, and she'd have to be smart about this if she was going to survive. The first night alone in the desert was the loneliest Beth had ever felt. She lay on her blanket looking up at more stars than she'd ever seen, and wondered if her father ever looked at the same sky and thought about what he'd done. thought about the daughter he'd left behind to face the consequences of his choices. She thought about her mother, too, dead these past 6 years from fever. Her mother had been a good woman who'd loved the wrong man. She'd made excuses for him right up until the day he rode off and never came back. Beth had been 16 then, left with nothing but a bad name and empty pockets. During the day, Beth would walk into town just far enough to fill her water bottles from the public well. She'd buy supplies with her dwindling money. The storekeepers took her coins but wouldn't meet her eyes. She was becoming invisible, a ghost on the edge of town. Sheriff Pike rode out once to check on her camp. "This is public land," Beth said before he could speak. "I'm not trespassing." "Never said you were." He looked at her pitiful camp and something might have been pity in his eyes, but it passed. "Just don't want trouble." "Neither do I, Sheriff." But Beth knew trouble would find her anyway. It always did. Because she'd learned the hard truth of frontier justice. Some people are born guilty and nothing they do can ever wash it clean. Her father had robbed that train, killed those men and disappeared into legend. She was just trying to survive, but in the eyes of Silver Ridge, she'd always be Jack Wade's daughter, and that was the worst crime of all. As she watched the sheriff ride away, Beth wondered how long she could last out here in the desert heat. How long before she'd have to run again, find another town, face the same cold stares and whispered accusations. She didn't know it then, but her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. 3 weeks into living in the desert, Beth had developed a routine. Wake before dawn, gather firewood while it was cool, make the long walk to the creek for water, then spend the hottest hours in the shade doing needlework on the few pieces she had left. It wasn't much of a life, but it was hers. On this particular morning, the sun was just starting to paint the sky orange when Beth headed out to collect wood. She'd found a spot about half a mile from her camp, where dead mesquite branches gathered in a dried-up riverbed. The wood burned hot and slow, perfect for her cooking fire. She was bending down to pick up a good-sized branch when she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it over the desert wind, a whimper like an injured animal. Beth froze, listening. The sound came again, weaker this time. She followed it, carefully making her way down the rocky slope into the deepest part of the old riverbed. That's when she saw him. A child lay crumpled against the rocks, an Apache boy who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. His dark hair was matted with blood, and his copper skin had gone pale. He wore traditional clothing now torn and dirty, and Beth could see immediately that he was badly hurt. Her first instinct was to run, not from cruelty but from fear. The Apache Wars were still fresh in everyone's mind. Settlers and Apache killed each other regularly, and the army had standing orders to capture any Apache found off the reservation. If anyone saw her with this child, they'd hang her for certain. But the boy whimpered again, and Beth couldn't make her feet move away. She knelt beside him, and that's when she saw the extent of his injuries. A bullet had torn through his shoulder, leaving an angry wound that had bled heavily. His left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. He had scrapes and bruises everywhere, and when Beth carefully touched his forehead, he was burning with fever. The boy's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were dark brown, glazed with pain and fear. He tried to speak but couldn't form words. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. Beth sat back on her heels, her mind racing. This child would die without help. But helping him could cost her everything. If Sheriff Pike found out, he'd arrest her for aiding the enemy. The townspeople already thought she was a criminal. This would prove them right in their minds. She looked at the boy's face, so young and vulnerable. Someone's son, maybe someone's brother. Dying alone in a riverbed because of a war he didn't start. Beth made her decision. She couldn't save herself from her father's reputation. But maybe she could save one life. Maybe that would count for something. Getting the boy back to her camp was the hardest physical work Beth had ever done. He was small but dead weight, and she had to be careful not to jostle his injuries too much. She half carried, half dragged him, stopping every few minutes to catch her breath. By the time she got him to her camp, her arms were shaking and sweat poured down her face despite the early hour. She laid him on her blanket in the shade and assessed the damage properly. The bullet wound was the most urgent. Beth had some experience with injuries from her childhood, watching her mother tend to her father's gunshot wounds more than once. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good. but the wound was dirty and starting to fester. Beth boiled water over her fire and used strips torn from her spare dress to clean the wound as best she could. The boy didn't wake, even when she had to dig out bits of dirt and fabric. She packed the wound with clean cloth and bound it tight. The broken leg was trickier. Beth found straight pieces of wood and used more strips of cloth to create a splint, trying to remember everything her mother had taught her. The boy moaned when she set the bone, but his eyes didn't open. For 3 days, Beth barely slept. The boy burned with fever, tossing and turning, crying out in Apache words she didn't understand. She dripped water into his mouth when she could. She changed his bandages. She kept him in the shade during the day and covered him with her blanket at night when the desert cold set in. She knew she should go to town for medicine, but she couldn't leave him alone, and she certainly couldn't take him with her. So she did what she could with what she had. Beth hunted rabbits using snares she made from wire, boiling the meat into broth. When the boy was unconscious, she'd tilt his head back and get spoonfuls of the broth down his throat. Every swallow felt like a victory. On the 4th day, his fever finally broke. Beth was changing his shoulder bandage when his eyes opened, and this time they were clear. He looked at her, and she could see the confusion on his face. Then fear flooded in, and he tried to scramble away despite his injuries. Wait. Beth held up her hands, showing she meant no harm. You're hurt. I'm helping you. Of course he didn't understand English. He pressed himself against the rock wall, breathing hard, eyes wild like a trapped animal. Beth could see him taking in his splinted leg, his bandaged shoulder, and the white woman kneeling in front of him. She moved slowly, picking up the water jug and taking a drink herself to show it was safe. Then she held it out to him. The boy watched her for a long moment, then snatched the jug and drank deeply, water spilling down his chin. Over the next few days, a strange kind of communication developed between them. Beth would point at things and say the English word: water, fire, food, sky. The boy watched her with intelligent eyes but didn't speak. On the 7th day, while Beth was mending her only other dress, the boy finally spoke. His voice was rough from disuse, but the word was clear: water. Beth looked up, startled, and smiled. Yes, water. She handed him the jug, and his lips twitched in something that might have been the beginning of a smile. After that, the boy began learning English words eagerly. He'd point at things and wait for her to tell him what they were called. In return, he taught her Apache words, though they were much harder for her tongue to form. One evening, as they sat by the fire eating rabbit stew, the boy drew in the dirt with a stick. He drew figures, simple but clear: soldiers on horses, people running, fire. Beth watched as he told his story in pictures. There had been an attack. The army had raided his family's camp without warning. His mother had pushed him into the rocks and told him to run. He'd been shot as he fled. He'd crawled and crawled until he couldn't move anymore. Your mother? Beth asked gently. The boy's face crumpled and tears ran down his cheeks. He didn't know if she'd survived. He didn't know if anyone had survived. Beth pulled him close and the boy cried against her shoulder. She felt her own tears falling. This child had lost everything just like she had. Different circumstances, different injustices, but the same crushing weight of being alone in a world that didn't want them. As the weeks passed, the boy healed. His leg was mending, though he'd probably always have a slight limp. The bullet wound scarred over, a permanent reminder of that terrible day. He was eating well now, putting on weight, and the haunted look in his eyes was fading. Beth learned his name through a combination of gestures and words. In Apache it meant wise child, and she could see why. Despite his young age, there was an old soul quality to him. He observed everything, learned quickly, and had a quiet dignity about him. One afternoon, Beth had to go into town for supplies. She'd been putting it off, but they needed salt and beans, and her sewing money was almost gone. She told the boy to stay hidden in the rocks no matter what. When she returned, loaded down with her purchases and a few odd sewing jobs she'd managed to secure, the boy was exactly where she'd left him, but something had changed in his eyes. There was a hardness there that hadn't been before. Through broken English and gestures, he made her understand. He'd watched from the rocks as people in town treated her. He'd seen them cross the street to avoid her, heard them call her names, watched her walk with her head down, accepting their cruelty. That night, as they sat by the fire, the boy reached over and took her hand. He looked at her with those serious dark eyes and spoke carefully in the English she'd taught him. You, Save me, you... Good. Beth felt her throat tighten. You're good too. People, bad to you. Sometimes people are bad to those who are different, Beth said softly. Your people have learned that. So have I. The boy nodded slowly, understanding more than his limited English could express. He'd found something in this white woman that he'd lost when the soldiers attacked his family. Not a replacement for his mother, but something else. Someone who understood what it meant to be cast out. Someone who'd saved his life when she had no reason to, when it would have been easier and safer to walk away. In the firelight, watching this boy who'd suffered so much, Beth realized something. She'd been trying to survive alone, convinced that isolation was safety. But maybe surviving wasn't the same as living. Maybe this accidental family of two outcasts was exactly what they both needed. She didn't know yet about the vow he was planning. Didn't know that in his culture a life debt was sacred, unbreakable, eternal. Didn't know that this child was about to pledge his entire future to protecting her. But she would learn soon enough. 2 months had passed since Beth found the boy in the riverbed. He could walk now with only a slight limp, and his shoulder had healed to a pink scar. He'd grown taller too. Or maybe he just stood straighter now that he wasn't weak and scared. They'd developed a real language between them, a mix of English and Apache with lots of hand gestures thrown in. The boy was smart, picking up new words every day. Beth learned slower, but she could now say basic things in Apache. Enough to make him smile when she got the pronunciation right. She'd learned more about him too. His name in Apache meant wise child, given to him because even as a baby he'd been unusually calm and observant. He was 9 years old, though the hard life had made him seem both younger and older at the same time. He'd had 2 sisters, both younger. He didn't know what happened to them. The boy learned about Beth too. She told him about her father, about being blamed for crimes she didn't commit, about running from town to town trying to escape a reputation that followed her like a shadow. He listened carefully, and she could see understanding in his young face. He knew what it meant to be judged for things you couldn't control. One morning, Beth had to make a trip into Silver Ridge. They were completely out of flour, and she'd managed to save enough money from taking in sewing work to buy supplies. She'd been dreading this trip for days. Stay here, she told the boy like always. Stay hidden in the rocks. If anyone comes, you run. You understand? He nodded, but there was something troubled in his expression. You come back? Of course I'm coming back. Beth knelt down so they were eye level. I always come back. Promise? I promise. She set off toward town with her empty sack, the morning sun already hot on her shoulders. The walk took about 40 minutes, and Beth used the time to prepare herself mentally. The stares, the whispers, the way shopkeepers took her money but acted like her touch might contaminate their goods. Silver Ridge hadn't changed. If anything, the hostility seemed worse. Beth kept her head down as she walked to Cooper's general store. She could feel eyes on her from every window, every doorway. Inside the store, old Mr. Cooper barely grunted a greeting. Beth gathered what she needed quickly, trying to be invisible. But as she was paying, she overheard 2 women talking by the fabric display. Outlaw's daughter, living out there like some kind of animal. Heard she's been stealing chickens from the Henderson farm. Wouldn't surprise me. Criminal blood runs deep. Beth's hands shook as she counted out her coins. She hadn't stolen anything. She hadn't even been near the Henderson farm. But the accusation would stick anyway, added to the growing list of crimes she didn't commit. Mr. Cooper gave her the change without meeting her eyes. Best you don't come around too often, Miss Wade. People are getting nervous. I just need supplies, Beth said quietly. I'm not causing trouble. Your father caused plenty. That's trouble enough. Beth left the store with her flour and beans, feeling the weight of every stare following her down the street. She walked past the sheriff's office and saw Pike watching her through the window, his expression suspicious as always. What Beth didn't know was that the boy had followed her. Despite her warnings, he'd trailed behind at a distance, moving from rock to rock, staying out of sight. He wanted to see where she went, wanted to understand this town that treated her so badly. He watched from behind a water trough as Beth came out of the store, saw how people moved away from her on the boardwalk, heard the muttered insults as she passed, watched a group of children throw dirt clods at her back while adults looked on and did nothing. The boy's hands clenched into fists. Among his people, such behavior toward a woman, especially one alone, would be shameful. She had done nothing to these people. She'd broken no laws he could see, yet they treated her worse than an enemy. He followed Beth back toward camp, staying hidden. She never knew he was there, but he'd seen enough. He understood now why there was such sadness in her eyes sometimes, even when she smiled. She was strong, his Beth, but everyone had limits. That evening, as the sun set and painted the desert red and gold, the boy did something that surprised Beth. He'd been gathering items all afternoon while she was cooking dinner. A sharp stone, some dried sage, the eagle feather he'd been carrying in his pouch since before the attack. He arranged them carefully by the fire, then gestured for Beth to sit across from him. She did, curious and a little worried. He'd never been this serious before. The boy began to speak in Apache slowly and clearly. Beth caught maybe half the words, but his tone and expression told her this was important, sacred even. He talked about his people's ways, about honor and debts, about how when someone saved your life, that created a bond that couldn't be broken. In his culture, a life saved was a life owed, not as a burden but as a gift, a chance to repay with loyalty and protection everything that had been given. Beth listened, understanding growing even though she missed some words. "You don't owe me anything," she said gently. "I helped because it was right, because you needed help." He shook his head firmly. "You save. I owe, not pay with things." He struggled for the English words. "Pay with life. My life, for your life." Before Beth could stop him, the boy picked up the sharp stone. With one quick motion, he drew it across his palm. Blood welled up, bright red in the firelight. "Wait, what are you doing?" Beth reached for him, but he held up his other hand to stop her. He held out the stone to her, his cut palm still bleeding. His eyes were intense, determined. This wasn't a child's game or impulse. This was something deep and real. Beth understood what he was asking. A blood oath. She'd heard of such things, but never seen one. In his culture, in his young heart, he was offering her something precious. His word, his protection, his loyalty. "You're just a child," she whispered. He drew himself up straighter. "I am warrior. You are family. I protect family." Beth looked at this boy who'd lost everything, who had every reason to hate the white people who'd destroyed his home and killed his kin. Yet here he was, offering her his blood and his promise because she'd shown him kindness when she had nothing to give. Tears blurred her vision as she took the stone. She cut her own palm, feeling the sharp sting. The boy took her hand in his, pressing their bleeding palms together. His grip was surprisingly strong. He spoke in Apache, words she didn't fully understand but whose meaning she felt in her bones. A vow of protection, a promise that wherever she went he would follow. Whatever danger came, he would stand between her and it. For as long as he lived, her life would be as precious to him as his own. Then he repeated it in broken English, wanting her to understand completely. "I am your shield, your brother, your—" He searched for the word, finally settling on, "your guard, forever, until I die. You don't have to die for me," Beth said through her tears. "I will if I must." His young face was solemn, absolute in its certainty. "You saved me. I protect you. This is right, this is honor." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, blood mingling, an oath made under the vast desert sky. Beth had never had family that truly chose her. Her father had abandoned her. Her mother had died. Everyone else had rejected her because of a name she didn't choose. But this boy, this child of a people her people were at war with, had chosen her. Had looked at her and seen something worth protecting, worth dying for. "I don't know your real name," Beth realized suddenly. "Your Apache name. You never said it where I could understand." He smiled slightly, the first real smile she'd seen from him. He spoke it then, carefully, so she could hear each syllable. It was beautiful, rolling off his tongue in a way her voice could never quite match. "That's a good name," she said. "Strong." He squeezed her hand once more, then released it. Both their palms were marked now, a scar they'd carry forever. A reminder of the promise made this night. Beth bandaged both their hands with clean cloth, her mind reeling from what had just happened. She'd come to this desert to hide, to disappear, to survive alone. Instead, she'd found someone who saw her not as a criminal's daughter, not as a burden or a curse, but as someone worth protecting. That night, as they lay on opposite sides of the dying fire, Beth felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because she was hidden or invisible, but because someone stood watch over her. A 9-year-old boy with a limp and a scarred shoulder, who weighed maybe 70 pounds soaking wet, but whose promise was stronger than iron. She didn't know that his promise would be tested soon. That the peaceful days in their desert camp were numbered. That forces were already moving that would tear apart their small world and force the boy to prove whether his oath was just words or something more. But tonight, under the stars with the mark of his blood still fresh on her palm, Beth let herself hope. Maybe the universe had finally decided to be kind. Maybe this child was a gift to balance out all the cruelty she'd endured. Or maybe, just maybe, they were gifts to each other. Two lost souls who'd found in the desert what they couldn't find anywhere else. Family. 3 weeks after the blood oath, Beth woke to the sound of horses. Multiple horses moving fast. Her eyes snapped open in the pre-dawn darkness, and beside her she could feel the boy was already awake, tense and alert. They both knew what horses at this hour meant. Nothing good. Beth scrambled to her feet, quickly kicking dirt over the remains of last night's fire. "Hide," she whispered urgently to the boy. "Now, like we practiced." He hesitated, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. A knife Beth had traded for in town, telling herself it was just for cutting rope and preparing food, knowing in her heart it was for protection. "Go," she hissed. "Please." The boy melted into the rocks just as 6 riders came around the outcropping. Sheriff Pike led them, his face grim in the growing light. Behind him were 5 men Beth recognized from town. They all carried rifles. Elizabeth Wade. Pike's voice boomed across the camp. "Don't even think about running." Beth stood still, her hands visible, her heart hammering. "I'm not running, Sheriff." "What's this about?" Pike dismounted, the other men following suit. They spread out, surrounding her camp, their guns ready. Beth noticed they were looking at everything, taking inventory of her meager possessions. "Stagecoach got robbed yesterday on the road from Tucson," Pike said, walking slowly toward her. "Payroll shipment. $12,000. 3 men did it, and the driver says they rode like professionals. Military style," he said. "Just like the old days." Beth's stomach dropped. "I don't know anything about that." Driver said one of the robbers had a distinctive way of sitting his horse. Leaned forward, favoring his right side. Exactly the way Jack Wade used to ride. Pike's eyes were hard. "You wouldn't know where your father is, would you?" "I haven't seen my father in 6 years. I told you that, and I told you I don't believe you." Pike nodded to his men. "Search the camp. You have no right." "I have every right. You're a suspect in a federal crime." The men tore through her belongings. They dumped out her sewing kit, scattering needles and thread. They kicked over her cooking pot. One man found her small money pouch and opened it, counting the coins. "She's got $43 here, Sheriff," the man called out. "That's my sewing money." Beth protested. "I earned every cent." "Or it's your cut from the robbery," Pike said. "Funny how it showed up right after the holdup. I've had that money for weeks. Ask Mr. Cooper, I've been buying supplies regularly." But Pike wasn't listening. His eyes had caught on something else. The second blanket laid out on the other side of the fire. 2 sets of eating utensils. A smaller pair of moccasins drying on a rock. "You got company out here, Miss Wade?" Beth's mouth went dry. "No, those are just extras." Pike walked over to the moccasins, picked one up. It was clearly made for a child, clearly Apache in design. His face hardened. "These are Indian shoes, child-sized." He looked around the camp more carefully now, seeing the second sleeping space, the smaller portions of food. "You hiding in Apache, Miss Wade?" "No." But even as she said it, one of Pike's men shouted from the rocks. "Sheriff, up here!" Beth's heart stopped. "No, please no." The man emerged from the rocks, dragging the boy by his arm. The child's face was set in defiant anger, but Beth could see the fear underneath. He'd tried to run deeper into the rocks, but there were too many men. The riders all raised their rifles at once, and Beth screamed, "Don't shoot! He's just a child!" Pike stared at the boy, then at Beth, his expression transforming from suspicion to certainty. "You've been harboring an Apache." "A hostile! He's not hostile!" "He's 9 years old and he was dying when I found him. The law says any Apache found off the reservation is to be captured and returned. Or shot if they resist." Pike gestured to his men. "Tie him up." The boy fought like a wildcat as 2 men grabbed him. He kicked and bit, shouting in Apache, his voice high and desperate. He was looking at Beth, and she could see the betrayal in his eyes. Not betrayal by her, but betrayal of his promise. He'd sworn to protect her, and now he couldn't. Stop hurting him. Beth ran forward, but Pike caught her arm. You're under arrest, he said coldly, for suspicion of robbery, conspiracy, and harboring a hostile Apache in violation of territorial law. I didn't rob anyone. I didn't conspire with anyone. I saved a child's life. Tell it to the judge. Pike nodded to another man who produced iron shackles. They locked them around Beth's wrists, the metal cold and heavy. The boy saw this and screamed, a sound of pure anguish. He thrashed so hard that one man lost his grip. The boy lunged for Beth, reaching for her even though his hands were tied, crying out words in Apache that tore at her heart. One of the men hit him. Not hard, but enough to stun him, and the boy fell to his knees. You don't have to hurt him, Beth shouted. He's just scared. Should have thought of that before you broke the law, Pike said. He turned to his men. Take the woman to the jail. The Indian kid goes to the church. Reverend Miller can hold him there until we figure out what to do with him. They were separated then, dragged in opposite directions. The boy was screaming Beth's name, the English name he'd learned to say. She was screaming back, telling him it would be okay, a lie they both knew but she had to say anyway. The ride back to Silver Ridge was rough. Pike's men didn't care if Beth's horse went too fast or if branches hit her. She was a criminal now, proven beyond doubt. The daughter of an outlaw, hiding an Apache child, probably in league with her father's gang. Word spread fast. By the time they reached town, people were lining the streets. Some shouted insults. Others just stared with cold satisfaction, like they'd always known she was guilty and now they had proof. They threw Beth into the town jail, a small stone building with 2 cells. The iron door clanged shut, and she was alone in the darkness, still shackled. Hours passed. Beth sat on the hard wooden bench that served as a bed, her mind racing. The boy was somewhere in this town, probably terrified. He'd lost his family once, and now he'd lost her. The one person who'd shown him kindness in this harsh world, and she was being blamed for a robbery she had nothing to do with. Her father's crime visited upon her once again, even if she could prove she wasn't involved. The charge of harboring an Apache was real. They had witnesses. They had evidence. As evening fell, Sheriff Pike came to her cell. He pulled up a chair and sat backwards on it, arms resting on the back, studying her. Here's how this is going to go, he said. Tomorrow morning we're holding a hearing. Judge Thompson is riding in from Tucson. Given the evidence and your family history, I'd say you're looking at hanging. Beth's blood turned to ice. I'm innocent. You had an Apache child in your camp. That alone is enough. He was dying. What was I supposed to do? Let him die? Yes, Pike said simply. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. He's the enemy, Miss Wade. We're at war. He's a child. Apache children grow up to be Apache warriors. Pike stood, his chair scraping on the stone floor. You made your choice. Now you'll pay for it. After he left, Beth buried her face in her shackled hands. She'd known the risks, known that helping the boy could cost her everything, but she'd done it anyway because it was right, because he was a child who needed help, because she couldn't live with herself if she'd walked away. Now they'd both pay the price. In the church basement across town, the boy sat in a locked room, his hands still tied. Reverend Miller had given him water and bread, but the boy wouldn't touch either. He sat beneath the small window, looking out at the darkening sky, his young face set in determination. Beth had taught him English, had fed him and healed him, had treated him with kindness when everyone else would have killed him on sight. She'd asked nothing in return except that he stay safe, and he'd made her a promise, a blood oath. He'd sworn to protect her with his life. The boy looked at the rope around his wrists, then at the window. It was small, but he was small too, and he'd escaped from worse situations before. As night fell over Silver Ridge, the boy began working on his bonds. They thought he was just a child, helpless and contained. They didn't know that Apache children learn to survive in ways town children never imagined. They didn't know that he'd tracked deer through mountains, that he'd gone days without water, that his mother had trained him to slip through spaces that seemed impossible. Most of all, they didn't know about the promise, about the oath that burned in his chest stronger than any rope or lock. Beth had saved him. Now he would save her or die trying. The boy worked on his ropes through the entire night. The Reverend had tied them well, but Apache children learned patience from birth. He used the rough edge of a nail sticking out from the wooden floor, sawing back and forth, ignoring the pain as the rope cut into his wrists. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the small window, his hands were free. The boy flexed his fingers, working feeling back into them, then turned his attention to the door. It was locked from the outside, heavy wood with iron hinges. But the window, small as it was, had no bars. The boy pushed the simple latch and eased the window open. The frame was maybe 18 inches across. Most adults couldn't have fit through it. But the boy was thin from weeks of healing, and Apache children learned to make themselves small. He went through head first, wiggling his shoulders, ignoring the scrape of wood against his healing bullet wound. For a moment he stuck and panic fluttered in his chest. Then he exhaled completely, made himself even smaller, and slipped through. He dropped 6 feet to the ground, landing in a crouch silent as shadow. The town was just waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys. A rooster crowed somewhere. The boy stayed low, moving from building to building, heading east. Away from Silver Ridge, toward the mountains, toward his people. He'd been unconscious when Beth found him, didn't remember exactly where he'd come from. But Apache children knew direction like they knew breathing. The sun rose in the east. The mountains his people called home were northeast. He would find them. The boy ran. His legs still hurt from the break, making him limp, but he pushed through the pain. Beth needed him. Nothing else mattered. It took him 2 full days and nights to find his people. He survived on water from streams and roots he dug up. He followed his instincts and the stories his mother had told him about the sacred places. On the afternoon of the second day, he was found by a hunting party from his uncle's band. They almost shot him before recognizing who he was. His uncle, a warrior named Nantan, grabbed him in fierce embrace. "We thought you were dead. Your mother mourns you daily." The boy gasped for breath. "Mother lives?" "Yes, she escaped the attack. She is with our camp." Nantan held the boy at arm's length, studying him. "How did you survive? Where have you been?" "I will tell the council. But first we must ride. Now. There is no time." The warriors took him to their camp, hidden in a box canyon 3 hours' ride from where they found him. When the boy's mother saw him, she fell to her knees, sobbing. She held him so tight he could barely breathe, touching his face, his hair, making sure he was real. My son, I watched you run from the soldiers and thought I'd never see you again." The boy hugged her back, but he couldn't stay in her arms. "Mother, I need the council. I need help." Within the hour, he stood before the tribal elders. His uncle Nantan was there, along with the war chief, the peace chief, and several senior warriors. The boy's mother sat nearby, pride and worry mixing on her face. The boy told them everything. The bullet wound, the broken leg, waking to find a white woman tending him. The weeks of healing, how Beth had shared her food when she barely had enough for herself. How she'd hidden him, protected him, taught him English. How the townspeople treated her worse than an enemy because of her father's crimes. "She saved my life," the boy said, his young voice clear and strong. "I made a blood oath to protect her. Now the white men have taken her prisoner. They will kill her tomorrow. I must save her." Silence fell over the council. Nantan spoke first, his voice heavy with regret. "You ask us to risk our people to save one white woman. Do you know what you're asking? If we attack the town, the army will hunt us. Many will die." "I do not ask for an attack," the boy said. "I ask only for help. A few warriors, under cover of night. We take her and disappear. No one dies unless they force us." The war chief shook his head. "She is one woman. Our people are many. We cannot risk the many for the one. She risked everything for one." The boy's voice rose with passion. "I was one child, a stranger, an enemy in her people's eyes. She could have left me to die. It would have been easier, safer. But she chose to save me. Now I must choose to save her." "You are a child," one elder said, not unkindly. "You cannot make such choices." "I made an oath. A blood oath." The boy held up his scarred palm. "Is our word meaningless? Do our traditions mean nothing? She saved my life. Honor demands I try to save hers." His mother spoke then, her voice quiet but carrying weight. "I too owe this woman a debt. She returned my son to me. Without her I would still be mourning." She looked at Nantan, her brother. "If you will not help, I understand. But I will help my son." Nantan closed his eyes, a man caught between duty and honor. He loved his nephew. He respected his sister. But he had responsibility for the whole band's safety. The peace chief, an old man with wise eyes, spoke for the first time. "The boy speaks of honor. of debts and oaths. These things matter. They define who we are. He looked around at the council. If we abandon honor to save ourselves, what have we saved? Just our bodies. Our spirits will be dead. Debate raged for hours. Some warriors argued passionately against involvement. Others, moved by the boy's courage and the woman's kindness, argued for helping. The sun set as they talked, voices rising and falling. Finally, Nantan spoke. I will help. Not with the full band, but a small group. 6 warriors, including myself. We will ride tonight, free the woman, and return before dawn. If we succeed, it will be blamed on a random Apache raid. If we fail, he didn't finish that thought. The boy threw his arms around his uncle. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is dangerous for all of us. Nantan looked at his nephew seriously. You will stay here. This is too risky for a child. No, the boy pulled back. I made the oath. I must be there. You're 9 years old with a barely healed leg. I know the town. I know where they hold her. You need me. Nantan looked ready to argue, but the boy's mother put a hand on his arm. Let him go. He is young, yes, but he has earned this, and he speaks truth. They will need someone who knows the place, so it was decided. As night fell, 7 figures slipped out of camp. 6 warriors on horses, battle-tested men who moved like ghosts, and 1 9-year-old boy with a limp and a promise to keep. They rode through the darkness, pushing hard. The boy led them to within a mile of Silver Ridge, then they dismounted and went on foot. The town was quiet, most people sleeping. A single lamp burned in the sheriff's office. The jail was a separate building, stone with a heavy door. 1 guard sat outside, half asleep in a chair. Nantan moved like smoke. And before the guard knew anyone was there, he was unconscious on the ground, alive but out cold. The boy picked the guard's pocket and found the keys. His small fingers worked better in the dark than the warrior's larger hands. Inside the jail was pitch black. Beth, the boy whispered loudly. Beth, where are you? Here, I'm here. Her voice came from the left cell. The boy fumbled with keys, trying each one. Finally, a lock clicked. The cell door swung open and Beth stumbled out. She grabbed the boy, holding him tight. You came back. How did you... No time. Must go now. They slipped out into the night. The warriors had brought an extra horse for Beth. She'd never ridden Apache style, but she'd have to learn fast. They helped her up and the boy swung up behind his uncle. They were halfway across the town square when someone shouted, Escape, the prisoner's escaping. Lights flared in windows. Men poured into the street. Sheriff Pike emerged from his house, still pulling on his pants, shouting orders. Ride, Nantan commanded. They rode hard, hooves thundering on the packed earth. Shots rang out behind them, bullets whining in the air. Beth hunched low over her horse's neck, praying she wouldn't fall off. They hit the desert at full gallop, and behind them, the town erupted into chaos. Men were saddling horses, forming a posse. Pike's voice carried across the night, full of rage and promise. Get them! I want every man mounted. We ride at first light. The Apache warriors led Beth and the boy through the darkness, following paths only they knew. By the time the sun rose, they were 20 miles away and still moving. Beth rode beside the boy, her face scratched from branches, her body aching from the hard ride. But she was free, and the boy sat straight on his uncle's horse, his promise fulfilled. He'd sworn to protect her with his life, and when the test came, he'd kept his word. But Beth could see the worry on the warriors' faces. They'd succeeded in the rescue, yes. But now the real danger began. Sheriff Pike wouldn't stop. He'd form the biggest posse he could, maybe even call in the army. They'd hunt until they found them. And when they did, there would be blood. For 3 days they ran. Nantan led them deeper into Apache territory, through canyons where the rocks rose like cathedral walls, and across mesas where you could see for miles. They moved fast, covering ground, always looking over their shoulders. Beth learned to ride properly those 3 days. She had no choice. Fall behind and die, or keep up and survive. Her thighs screamed from gripping the horse, her hands blistered from the reins, but she didn't complain. These men had risked everything to save her. The boy rode with his uncle most of the time, but sometimes he'd drop back to check on Beth. You good? He'd ask in his careful English. I'm good. She'd lie. And he'd smile because he knew she was lying, but respected her for trying. On the 4th day, they reached Nantan's camp. The band had moved since the rescue as a precaution. They were nestled now in a hidden canyon with only one entrance, easy to defend. The boy's mother waited at the camp's edge. When she saw her son safe and whole, she ran to him. Beth watched the reunion, tears in her eyes. This woman had every reason to hate white people, but when the boy pointed to Beth and explained again what she'd done, his mother approached slowly. She spoke in Apache, and the boy translated. "My mother says she thanks you for my life, for bringing me home." Beth didn't know what to say. "He's a good boy, a brave boy." The mother touched Beth's face gently, studying her. Then she nodded as if deciding something, and led Beth to a shelter where she could rest. That night, there was a council. Beth sat with the boy beside her while the adults talked. She couldn't understand most of the rapid Apache, but she caught the tone. Worry, anger, fear. Nantan finally turned to Beth, speaking slow English. "The white men will come. Many white men, maybe soldiers. They will track us here." "I'm sorry," Beth said. "I never wanted to bring trouble to your people." "You did not bring trouble. We chose to help." Nantan's face was serious. "But now we must decide. Do we run? Do we fight? Do we give you back?" The boy jumped to his feet. "No, we cannot give her back. They will kill her." "They may kill us all if we keep her," one of the warriors said harshly. Beth stood up. "I won't let you fight for me. I'll go, I'll turn myself in. Tell them I forced you to help, that I had a gun." "No one will believe that," Nantan said. "And we do not lie to save ourselves." He looked around the circle. "This woman saved one of ours when she had no reason to. When it put her in danger, our honor demands we protect her now." "Honor won't stop bullets," another warrior muttered. "Then we will need more than honor." The debate went on for hours. Some wanted to run farther into the mountains. Others wanted to scatter, make it harder for the soldiers to track them. A few, the youngest warriors, wanted to fight. Finally, the peace chief spoke. He was very old, his face like carved wood, his eyes still sharp. "We cannot run forever. We cannot fight an army, but perhaps we do not need to do either." Everyone leaned forward, listening. "The white men chased the woman because they say she is a criminal. But is this true? Did anyone see her rob the stagecoach?" "No," Nantan said slowly. "They accuse her because of her father. Then perhaps the truth is a weapon. If she is innocent, someone must prove it. And if someone else is guilty, they must be found." The old man looked at Beth. "Did you rob the stagecoach?" "No, sir. I've never robbed anything in my life." "Then someone else did. Find them and you are free." "How?" Beth asked. "I'm one person and I'm being hunted." "How can I find the real robbers?" "You cannot. But perhaps," the old man smiled slightly, "perhaps you have friends who can move in places you cannot." The next morning, Nantang and two warriors rode out. Not running, but hunting for information. While they were gone, Beth lived with the band. The boy's mother, whose name was Desba, taught her things. How to grind corn, how to prepare rabbit skin, how to find water in places that looked dry. The other women were cautious at first. A white woman in their camp, the cause of possible war, was not welcome. But they watched how their children took to Beth, how she played with them and made them laugh. They saw how she worked hard, never asking for special treatment. Slowly, ice melted. The boy was happy for the first time since Beth found him. He had his mother, his people, and the woman who'd saved him all in one place. He taught Beth more Apache words, and she taught the children English. At night, around the fire, she told them stories from books she'd read, and they told her stories of Coyote the trickster. But the peace was fragile. Everyone knew it. On the 6th day, scouts rode in with news. A large posse was coming, 50 men, maybe more, led by Sheriff Pike. They were tracking the Apache trail, moving slow but steady. "They are 2 days away," the scout reported. "Maybe 3 if we are lucky." That same evening, Nantan returned. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "What did you learn?" the peace chief asked. "Many things." Nantan dismounted, accepting water. "We watched the town from the hills. We listened to the talk. The people are scared, yes, but they are also angry at Sheriff Pike." "Why?" Beth asked. "Because he let you escape. Because he locked a child in a church basement. Because—" Nantan smiled grimly. "Because his deputy disappeared." "What?" 3 days ago, the deputy, a man named Crawford, rode out of town. No one has seen him since. He took money from the sheriff's office. A lot of money. Beth's mind raced. "Crawford? He was always hanging around when Pike questioned me." He's the one who found evidence in my camp. We tracked him. Nantan continued. Found his camp 40 miles west. He was meeting with 2 other men. Rough men, gunmen. He paused. They had a lot of money. More money than a deputy should have. The stagecoach robbery, Beth breathed. He did it, or helped do it. We watched them for a day, heard them talk. Crawford planned to go to Mexico, start over. But first he wanted Pike distracted. Chasing you was perfect distraction. Did you? Beth hesitated. Did you capture him? No, we left them alone. But we know where they are. Nantan looked at the peace chief. We could lead Pike's posse there. Let the white men find their own criminal. But how do we get Pike to follow us there instead of here? One warrior asked. The boy, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. I know how. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood, his young face serious. Pike wants Beth, but he also wants to look strong. If we give him a bigger prize, he will take it. What prize? Nantan asked. Crawford and the money. If we lead Pike there, he catches the real criminals. He gets the money back. He looks like a hero. Better than catching one escaped woman. The boy is wise, the peace chief said. But how do we lead Pike without leading him to our camp? A false trail, Nantan said slowly. We make it look like we are running west. Leave signs, let them follow. When they are close to Crawford's camp, they will hear the men, maybe see their fire. Pike will investigate, and if he does not, another warrior challenged. If he ignores Crawford and keeps hunting us, then we fight, Nantan said simply. But I think Pike is greedy. He will want that money. The plan was risky. Everything depended on Pike being more interested in the robbery money than in capturing Beth. But it was the best chance they had. That night, Beth couldn't sleep. The boy found her sitting outside her shelter looking at the stars. You scared? He asked, sitting beside her. Terrified, me too. They sat in silence for a while. Then Beth said, You shouldn't have come for me. You should have stayed safe, I promised. You're a child. Children shouldn't have to keep promises that might get them killed. The boy looked at her with those old eyes in his young face. My people, we grow up fast, we have to. When I made the promise, I knew what it meant. I am not sorry. I'm sorry, Beth whispered. I'm sorry my problems became your problems. Sorry I brought danger to your family. You gave me life twice, once when you healed my body, once when you gave me purpose. He touched the scar on his palm. This is not burden. This is honor, you understand? Beth nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. The next morning, the plan began. Half the warriors stayed to protect the camp. The other half, including Nantan and the boy, rode out with Beth. They headed west, away from the camp, leaving an obvious trail. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, Pike's posse followed. They could feel the hunters getting closer with each passing hour. On the second day, they reached rough country, broken rocks and steep slopes. Perfect ambush territory. The warriors positioned themselves on the high ground while Beth and the boy waited in a small canyon. And then they waited for Sheriff Pike to walk into a truth he wasn't expecting. But waiting was hard. Every sound made Beth jump. Every shadow could be a threat. The boy stayed close, his hand never far from his knife. If things go bad, Beth told him quietly, you run. Promise me. Whatever happens to me, you get back to your mother. The boy's jaw set stubbornly. I do not run from promises. Please, for me. Promise me. He didn't answer, and Beth knew what that meant. He'd made his choice months ago in the desert. He'd keep his vow or die trying. As the sun began to set on the second day, they heard it. Horses, many horses. The posse had caught up. It was time to see if their desperate plan would work, or if this canyon would become their final stand. The posse appeared on the ridge just as the sun touched the horizon, turning the sky blood red. Beth counted at least 40 men, maybe more. They were dusty, tired, but determined. At their head rode Sheriff Pike, his face grim with purpose. Nantan had positioned his warriors perfectly. They were invisible among the rocks, watching everything. Beth and the boy stayed hidden in a small cave, the opening covered with brush. Pike called a halt at the canyon entrance. His men spread out, rifles ready, eyes scanning for ambush. The sheriff was no fool. He knew Apache territory, knew the danger. They came through here, one tracker called out, pointing at the deliberately obvious signs Nantan had left. Broken branches, hoofprints in soft earth, even a piece of torn cloth caught on a bush. Pike studied the trail, then looked up at the surrounding rocks. It's too easy. They want us to follow. Maybe they're running scared, one deputy suggested. Making mistakes. Apache don't make mistakes. Pike chewed his mustache, thinking. Then he made a decision. Half the men stay here, guard our backs. The rest come with me. Slow and careful. The posse moved forward, following the trail deeper into the canyon. Beth held her breath as they passed within 50 feet of her hiding spot. She could hear the men talking, complaining about the heat, the rough country, the wild goose chase. Then one of Pike's men pulled up short. "Sheriff! You hear that?" Everyone went silent. In the distance, voices carried on the wind. Men's voices laughing and arguing. Pike's eyes narrowed. "That's not Apache." "Sounds like white men," another rider said. Pike gestured for quiet. They moved forward more slowly now, following the sound. The trail Beth's group had been leaving intersected with another trail here, one made by Crawford and his men days before. They rounded a bend, and there it was. A camp nestled in a protected spot, smoke rising from a fire. 3 men sat around it counting money. Stacks and stacks of paper money. Pike's jaw dropped. Then his face hardened with fury. He recognized one of the men immediately. Deputy Crawford, who was supposed to be tracking criminals, was sitting with 2 known outlaws, dividing stolen money. "That's the Henderson gang," Pike whispered to his men. "And my own deputy is with them." Crawford looked up suddenly, some instinct warning him. He saw Pike and the posse, and his face went white. "Ride!" he screamed, grabbing for his gun. The canyon erupted in gunfire. Crawford's gang fired at the posse, trying to fight their way out. Pike's men fired back, their rifles cracking like thunder. One outlaw went down immediately, shot through the chest. The second tried to run and took a bullet in the leg. Crawford made it to his horse, firing wildly behind him. A bullet grazed Pike's arm, drawing blood. The sheriff snarled and took careful aim. His shot caught Crawford in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up. The gunfight was over in less than 2 minutes. 1 outlaw dead, 1 wounded, Crawford captured. And scattered across the ground all the money from the stagecoach robbery. Pike dismounted, holding his bleeding arm, and walked to where Crawford lay groaning. You robbed that stagecoach." "Pike, listen, I can explain. You let me arrest an innocent woman." "You framed her." Pike's voice shook with rage. "You hid stolen money and let me chase her halfway across the territory while you planned to run to Mexico." Crawford tried to speak, but Pike wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at the money, at his captured deputy, at the dead outlaw. The pieces were falling into place, and Pike was realizing how badly he'd been played. One of his men called out, "Sheriff, we found the stagecoach driver's watch." "And the strongbox." Pike looked at the evidence, then back toward where Beth's trail had led them. The Apache had known. They'd led him here on purpose, led him to the truth he'd been too blind to see. "Sir," another deputy said quietly, "if Crawford was the robber, then Miss Wade was innocent." Pike finished, his voice bitter. "And we arrested her anyway. Threw her in jail. Nearly hanged her." He looked around at his men. "And then Apache warriors risked their lives to save her because we wouldn't listen." The posse stood in uncomfortable silence. These men had been so sure. Beth was the outlaw's daughter, so of course she was guilty. They'd never questioned it, never looked deeper. And a 9-year-old boy had shown more honor than all of them combined. "We going after them?" one man asked. "The Apache and the woman?" Pike looked toward the canyon walls where he knew Apache warriors were watching. He'd seen the signs. They could have ambushed the posse easily, killed half his men, but they hadn't. They'd led him to the truth instead. "No," Pike said finally. "We're going home. We got our criminals. We got our money. That woman, she don't owe us nothing. If anything, we owe her." Crawford started to protest, but Pike silenced him with a look. "You'll hang for this. Robbing a federal stagecoach, murdering a guard, framing an innocent woman. I'll testify to all of it." As Pike's posse bound their prisoners and gathered the money, Beth watched from her hiding place. She could hardly believe it. The truth was out. Crawford was caught. The money recovered. The boy squeezed her hand. "See? Plan worked. Your uncle is very smart. He says you were smart too. Says you would have figured it out yourself given time." Beth wasn't so sure, but she smiled at the boy anyway. "We should wait until they're gone before we come out." They waited until nightfall. Pike's posse had ridden away, taking their prisoners and the recovered money. Only then did Nantan give the signal that it was safe. The warriors emerged from their positions. No one had been hurt. No shots fired at the posse. It had gone exactly as planned, but when they returned to camp 2 days later, the news was mixed. The peace chief had received a message from the army post. The commander wanted a meeting. He'd heard about the incident, about Crawford's capture, about Beth's innocence. He was offering something. They weren't sure what. Could be a trap. One warrior said darkly. Could be peace, the peace chief countered. We will not know unless we listen. Beth felt the weight of all eyes on her. This was about her ultimately. Her presence had caused all this trouble, but also led to Crawford's capture. She'd become a symbol of something larger, the question of justice, of truth, of whether White and Apache could ever find common ground. I should go, Beth said. Face whatever comes. You will not go alone, Nantan said firmly. We will send a delegation. Show the army we are not afraid. The meeting was set for neutral ground, a place both sides knew well. 3 days' ride north where a spring fed a grove of cottonwood trees. The army would bring their officers. The Apache would bring their leaders. And Beth would bring the truth of what happened. A young woman branded a criminal because of her father's sins, a child saved because of compassion, an escape born of honor, and a truth revealed because people chose justice over prejudice. As they prepared for the journey, the boy stuck close to Beth. His mother tried to make him stay behind, but he refused. Where Beth goes, I go, he said simply. I promised. Desba looked at her son, then at Beth, and sighed. He is stubborn like his father, and loyal like his father. Both good and bad things. I'll watch out for him, Beth promised. Desba smiled sadly. You have been watching out for him since you found him. Now he watches out for you. This is the way of things. Family protects family. The word hit Beth hard. Family. She'd lost her family years ago, or thought she had. Her father gone, her mother dead. No siblings or relatives who'd claim her. But here in this Apache camp, a 9-year-old boy and his mother called her family. Maybe family wasn't just blood. Maybe it was choice. Maybe it was who stood beside you when everything went wrong, who risked everything to save you, who kept promises even when keeping them was hard. That night, Beth sat by the fire with the boy, neither of them speaking. Tomorrow they'd ride toward an uncertain future. The army might arrest her anyway, laws being complicated things, or they might let her go. They might even apologize, though Beth doubted that. Men like Pike didn't apologize easily, but whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. She had a 9-year-old warrior who'd sworn to protect her. She had his uncle, who'd risked his people to prove the truth. She had his mother, who'd welcomed a stranger into her family. She had, against all odds, found belonging in the last place she'd expected. In the desert with her people's enemies, she'd found friends, found honor, found home. The boy leaned against her shoulder, tired but content. His scar-marked palm rested over hers, their blood oath made visible. A promise kept, a life saved. A debt repaid, and somehow, impossibly, the beginning of something that might actually be called justice. The meeting at the Cottonwood Grove brought together two worlds that usually met only in violence. On one side, army officers in blue uniforms, uncomfortable in the heat. On the other, Apache leaders in traditional dress, wary but willing to talk. Beth stood between them, literally and figuratively. The boy stood beside her, his hand never far from his knife, his eyes watching every soldier. The army commander was a man named Colonel Harrison, older, with gray streaking his beard. He looked at Beth for a long moment before speaking. Miss Wade, we've received word from Sheriff Pike about what happened, about Deputy Crawford's crimes, about your innocence. Beth said nothing, waiting. The territorial government has reviewed your case. The robbery charges are dropped. The charge of harboring a hostile Apache is... He paused. Complicated. She saved a child's life, Nantan said in careful English. This is crime. By law, any Apache found off reservation land must be detained and returned. Miss Wade broke that law. Harrison looked uncomfortable. However, given the circumstances and given that her actions led to the capture of actual criminals, the governor has decided to reduce the charge to a fine. $50, Beth almost laughed. A fine for saving a child's life. For doing what was right when everyone else wanted her to do wrong. I don't have $50, she said. Then the charge stands, and you'll need to work it off or face jail time. The peace chief spoke then, his old voice carrying authority. We have question for the colonel. Why do you punish kindness? Why do you punish woman who saved dying child? Your laws say Apache are enemies. But this child, he gestured to the boy, this child did no harm. He was wounded, innocent. She showed mercy. Your law says mercy is crime? Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Several of his officers looked away. The colonel cleared his throat. I don't make the laws, Chief. I just enforce them. Then your laws are wrong. Silence fell over the grove. It was a bold statement, dangerous even. But it was also true, and everyone there knew it. Finally, one of the officers spoke up, a young lieutenant with an honest face. Sir, if I may. There's a journalist from back east. Been writing about the Apache situation, about the reservation conditions. If this story gets out about how we arrested a woman for saving a child's life, it'll look bad. Real bad. Harrison glared at his lieutenant, but the young man had a point. Public opinion was shifting slowly. People back east were starting to question the harsh treatment of native peoples. A story about a woman nearly hanged for showing compassion would fuel that fire. What do you suggest, Lieutenant? Drop all charges completely. Call it a pardon for services rendered in capturing the real criminals. Harrison considered this. Politics and justice warring in his mind. Finally, politics won, but in Beth's favor this time. Fine, Miss Wade, you're free to go. All charges dropped. He looked at Nantan. And the boy can return to his people without consequence. This one time. This one time, Nantan repeated, his voice hard. And next time? Next time child needs help. White people let them die because of law? Harrison had no answer to that. But the peace chief had one more request. The woman. She has no home now. Your people do not want her. We would welcome her, if she wishes to stay with us. Everyone looked at Beth. She looked at the boy, who was trying not to look too hopeful, at Nantan, who nodded slightly, at Desba, who traveled with them and now smiled encouragingly. I would like that, Beth said softly. If you'll have me. Then it is decided. The peace chief stood, signaling the meeting was over. We go in peace. For now. The army officers rode away, and Beth felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Free. Actually free. Not running, not hiding, not constantly looking over her shoulder. The boy grabbed her hand and squeezed it. You stay? Really? Really? If that's okay with you? His smile was brighter than the desert sun. They returned to the camp, and life settled into a new rhythm. Beth learned the Apache ways more deeply now. How to tan hides properly. How to make medicines from desert plants. How to read the sky for weather and the ground for tracks. The boy grew taller, stronger. His limp faded to almost nothing. He learned to ride like the wind and shoot straight. But more than that, he learned the warrior's code. Honor, courage, loyalty, protection of the weak. And always, always, he stayed close to Beth. If she went to gather water, he went too. If she traveled to trade with distant camps, he was her escort. His blood oath wasn't forgotten or dismissed as a child's promise. It was real, living, daily, renewed. The years passed. Not easy years. The Apache faced constant pressure from the government to move to reservations. Some bands surrendered, others fought. Nantan's band did neither, existing in the spaces between, moving often, staying free. Beth became a bridge. She could speak both English and Apache fluently now. When traders came, she negotiated. When there were disputes with settlers, she mediated. She wasn't white anymore, not really. But she wasn't Apache either. She was something new, something in between. The boy became a young man, tall, lean, skilled with weapons and horses. Other young men sought glory and raids. He sought only to fulfill his promise. Where Beth went, he went. What Beth needed, he provided. When he was 16, his mother asked him why he didn't court the young women who clearly admired him. I have responsibility, he said simply. The oath. The oath does not mean you cannot have a life. Beth is my life, my purpose. When I was dying in that riverbed, I was nothing. She made me something. I will not forget. Desba looked at her son with mixed pride and sadness. He'd grown into a fine young man, but his devotion to Beth, while honorable, also limited him. Still, she said nothing. Some paths we must walk ourselves. The territorial wars continued, but gradually, inevitably, the Apache were losing. More bands were forced onto reservations. The free life in the mountains was ending. Nantan's band held out longer than most, but even they could see the end coming. By 1900, there were talks of surrender terms. The peace chief was dead, as was Beth's mother figure. Desba, age and hard living had taken them. The boy, now a man of 27, stood with his uncle and Beth as they discussed the future. "The army offers us land," Nantan said tiredly. He was older now too, gray in his hair, pain in his joints. "Not much. Not good land. But land where we can live in peace." "Will they let me stay with you?" Beth asked. She was 40 now, still strong but marked by years of hard living. They said, "Probably. You are not Apache by blood, but you are Apache by choice. They may allow it. And if they don't?" The man who'd been the boy spoke. "Then I leave reservation." "Stay with you. You can't do that," Beth protested. "Your people need you." "I need you." His voice was firm, final. "I made a promise 20 years ago. I have kept it every day since. I will keep it until I die." In the end, the army did allow Beth to live on the reservation, partly because she'd become known as someone who kept the peace, partly because a journalist had indeed written about her story years before, making her something of a minor celebrity in certain circles. The reservation years were hard. Confined spaces, limited resources, old enemies forced to live side by side. But Beth and the man who'd been the boy made it work. They helped settle disputes, taught children, preserved the old ways while adapting to new realities. He never married, despite many opportunities. When people asked why, he'd just show them the scar on his palm and say, "I have family." That is enough. Years turned into decades. The wild Apache days faded into memory, then legend. The old warriors died one by one, taking their stories with them, but some stories remained. In 1922, a young Apache woman named Lily was born. Her father, now 50 years old, held her with gentle hands scarred from a lifetime of keeping promises. "Your name," he told his daughter, "means light, like the woman who saved my life when I was your age, who showed me what honor means." Beth, now 62 and gray-haired, held the baby next. Tears ran down her weathered face. "You named her for me? Her name is yours." In English and Apache both, the man smiled. "She will know your story. Will know that you saved a dying boy, and that boy spent his life protecting you. Will know that family is not blood, but choice." Beth looked at this man who'd been a frightened 9-year-old when she found him, who'd grown into someone strong and honorable and true, who'd kept a child's promise for 40 years and never once complained about the burden. Except it had never been a burden to him. It had been a gift, a purpose, a way to repay the unpayable. "I love you," Beth said quietly. "Like a son, like family, I know. I have always known." He took her scarred palm in his. "Thank you. For my life. For my purpose. For showing me that kindness exists even in hard times." Beth lived another 8 years after that, long enough to see young Lily start to walk and talk, long enough to teach her some English words and tell her stories of the old days. When Beth died in 1930, peacefully in her sleep, the man who'd been the boy sat vigil beside her body for 3 days, as was the Apache way. He was 58 now, his hair more gray than black, his face weathered like old leather. But when he looked at her still face, he saw the young woman who'd found a dying child and chosen compassion over fear, who'd risked everything for nothing except the knowledge that it was right. He buried her on a hill overlooking the reservation, where she could see the mountains where they'd been free. He marked her grave with stones arranged in